You can do everything right. The scripts, the numbers, the viewings, and still hear no after no. It's not because rent to rent doesn't work. It's not your location. It may not even be anything you are saying, but this is one key thing you've got to do to make landlords say yes without hesitation. Once you get this right, the conversation shifts, objections vanish, and you're gonna start getting deals come to you. And this is the exact formula me and thousands of our mentees have used to generate over £100 million of rent-to-rent revenue. And on this video, I'm going to reveal it all. Stop selling, start closing. At the highest level, rent-to-rent is essentially sales. So in order for you to get as many rent-to-rent deals as possible, you're going to have to work on your sales. And this is why a lot of rent-to-rent courses and stuff out there don't work, because whilst they show you sort of how to do rent-to-rent, they don't show you the underlying skill set, the underlying business mechanisms you're going to need to get deals. You're going to need to get results. Now, look, I don't want to scare you because this stuff is simple and I'm going to break it down for you in this video so you just know a little bit about the sales psychology that's going to go into rent-to-rent. So the first thing we need to understand, right, is there are 3 different key measures, key different factors when it comes to closing a rent-to-rent deal that we need to consider, okay? The first of which, all right, is it's you, okay? And the reason I say it's you is because they are not only going to be buying into the guaranteed rent, the service, the concept, but first and foremost, they need to buy into you. So a lot of you out there say, but I'm brand new, it's a new business, you know, and you often try and sell the product or service, but you need to make sure that at all times you are selling yourself. So when you think about selling yourself, what are you going to think? Well, it's going to be, okay, it's going to be your presentation, all right? Let's just call it pres. How are you presenting yourself? A big one is going to be communication. You know, how are you communicating with the landlord? Are you speaking clearly? Are you articulate? All right, that's going to be absolutely essential. A big one here is your expertise, okay? Your expert is going to be absolutely key here. You've got to position yourself. So we talk about positioning a lot. We talk about positioning a lot in sales. How are you positioning yourself? Really a big common mistake I see people make is they position themselves as, you know, I could maybe view the property after work, which gives the impression you've got a 9 to 5. This isn't your main thing. That's not how you're going to want to position yourself. So you need to position yourself correctly. A big one for landlords is going to be your experience. How much experience do you have? That is going to be absolutely essential. Another thing that I really think is underplayed is your local knowledge. Are you local and can you look after their property? That's going to be absolutely key as well. Trust. And another one is your skills to do this. So when you're trying to sell you, if you start to actually look at these different things that we're trying to sell, you're going to find that you're way more likely to be able to close. And whatever you do, do not make the mistake of selling rent to rent too soon, because the first thing they need to do is they need to like you. And once they like you, they feel like your experience is on point. You're presenting yourself correctly. You know, your communications are, you do what you say you're going to do. You are where you say you're going to be at the right time. You know, your expert, your positioning, your locality. Do not underplay this, team. A lot of landlords live hours away from their property, so this can be a big asset. The trust factor, people do business with who they know, like, and trust, and skills. You're going to be way more likely to move on to stage 2 of closing the deal. Now, the second big thing that you're then going to want to be quote unquote selling, but remember, we're not selling, we're closing, of course, is your offer. Okay. Now, I generally do believe that if you can get the you part right and communicating correctly, this part is going to be a lot easier, because what we offer in rent to rent is unbelievable. And I always say this, if you look at the average landlord, right, and you think to yourself, what does the average landlord want? Well, okay, let's do some speech marks here. They're going to want their rent, correct? Yeah, of course, they're going to want their rent. They're going to want somebody who cares for their property. Yeah, of course, they're going to want somebody that looks after their property for sure. They're also going to want somebody that stays for the long term. Love that speech bubble. It's beautiful. They're going to want, it looks like a slingshot. They're going to want somebody that's going to stay for the long term. All right. That's absolutely key. And ultimately, they're going to want someone they absolutely trust, which goes back to point one. Now, if you can do all these things, guess what? You've got a happy landlord. So that is exactly what we do in terms of rent to rent. When you think about it, we are going to offer this landlord guaranteed rent. We're going to offer them, let's say a 5-year agreement. So we've ticked off, rent. We've ticked off the term. Well, in some cases, going to offer them a free or a subsidized cosmetic refurb. Okay. I'll just call it RF. We're going to be offering them a complimentary refurb in some cases. I've got other videos where I talk about this in great amount of detail. We're going to be doing regular cleaning. So when you start to think about all of these things, hey, let me add another one. We can act fast. So it's very speed. Okay, speed is going to be key for these landlords, because if you think about it, if you're a family and you find a property today, what's normally going to happen is you're going to have to serve 30 days notice to your current landlord. Then you're going to be maybe, a few days here and a few days there. So before you know it, the landlord might have to wait 45 days before they get the rent. We could start on Monday. So in terms of the offer part, this should be pretty simple. But what you do not want to do, and I always say this as well, is you've got to make sure that you don't sell rent to rent, because it comes across desperate. You need to make sure that you are positioning yourself, and then when you move to the offer, you just got to remember that this is a perfect offer for landlords. Now, remember one thing. Move on to the next page. I want you to remember one thing. This is absolutely key, and I'm going to put it in capitals, right? Rent to rent is not for everyone. And I always see this. I see this in my team. A lot of people put all their energy into people that would not ever be a good prospect, a good landlord. But you put all your energy and your confidence and your time, your sweat, blood and tears into the wrong people. So you always need to remember, if you position yourself correctly, and then if you position the offer correctly and it's still not for them, then don't worry. It's not you, it's them. Let's move on to the third key thing that we'll be selling. The third and final thing that we need to do to successfully close the deal is they like you, all right? They like the offer, but then what are they going to do before they sign the deal? They're going to want to do their due diligence on the business, your business. And the big challenges we have here is, if you set up last week, okay, they're going to be looking, right, what is your history? Okay, what is the business history? Which, if you just set up your business, there's not really going to be much, all right? What is your credibility? They're going to want to know, what is this person's credibility? They're also going to want to look at, and this is absolutely key, they're going to want to look at social proof, or what we call reviews, as part of that, your social media. They're going to want to look at some of these things, and this can be the sort of final part that makes deals fall out of bed. So if you notice, you may have seen my 12 steps checklist to set up your rent-to-rent business. If not, I'll post it below. That talks about how you can get the business set up correctly from day one, so that when it comes to this final thing, it's not going to come back to bite your bot. So another big key thing here is going to be your legals and compliance, because they will want to check that. And by the way, one of the biggest and easiest ways to lose a deal is when it comes to the business end, the contracts and all that stuff, you kind of show your inexperience. So this is going to be in some ways the most challenging part, but if you follow my system, I've worked with thousands of people brand new that get deals within a few weeks just from following these 3 key steps. Now, the next thing I want to share with you is going to be a little bit more in the field. Like, let's talk about the sales process. So there's 4 parts to the Rent to Rent 2.0 sales process, okay? Let's do some Olympic action, okay? So the first part, okay, so I want you to imagine this is S for start, and this is C for, okay, close. So this is when you basically get the first deal or your next deal. So the first part in the process is key. This is going to be disco, or what we call discovery. This is when you need to do your discovery on the landlord or the agent. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to understand the client, understand the prospect, and ideally we want to understand their challenges, their problems, their pain points, their motivations, so that when we move on, we can get this right. So let me give you an example. Let's just say you find out in discovery that the landlord is all about their rent. When we move on to the next point, we know that it's going to be all about offering the most attractive rent, and perhaps some of the other things they're less motivated by. But you have to find this stuff in discovery, because too many times what I do is I see mentees not doing the discovery correct. They get to the end of the process and then an objection comes in there. So here's some ideas of questions you should be asking here. You know, when was your last tenant? How long has the property been empty? Do you own the property alone? You know, what are your long-term plans for the property? What's your ideal tenant? Have you had any bad tenants? What was that like? Do you enjoy the maintenance? How much did you spend on maintenance last year? You got to do all of that stuff so that then we can understand their key pain points or motivations, not always pain, and then we can position ourselves correctly. All right. So then what happens is we move on to step 2 of the process, where essentially we are going to have to pitch or do our offer. Okay, so this is once we've heard the discovery, we now want to say, well, listen, Mrs. Landlord, appreciate the last tenants trashed the place. I also appreciate they've not been paying you rent. So what we would do is we would come in, all right, we would make sure the property was well cared for. We've got regular cleans. We could also actually guarantee your rent for the whole 5 years. You wouldn't have to worry about our clients, because we would just personally guarantee your rent. So when you do the pitch, key thing is keep it as tight and concise as possible. And make sure you're getting feedback after every single piece. So I always talk about this. This is basically where you want to just position your offer in the most efficient way and get feedback. All right. So the first thing is discovery. Second thing is pitch. The third step is we're going to move to close that deal. And I always talk about that. This is saying yes. So on every single rent-to-rent viewing, I always do these things. Discovery. I then do a pitch. I then close the deal at the end of the viewing. Now, I know you're thinking, but surely, Simon, you go home and look at the figures and this. No. I like to do it there and then, because I'm more likely to get the deal and understand where they're at and the final circle, which we're going to move on to, if I do that at the deal. So at the end, not the viewing, sorry. So at the end of the viewing, I want to say, hey, Mr. Landlord, love the property. You know, I'd really like to move forward. What did you say the rent was? They say £1,500. And I'm going to say, okay, if I was to offer you a long-term agreement, would there be any movement on the 1,500? And they're going to say, what you got in mind, Simon? And I'm going to say, could you do 1,400? And they're probably going to say, no, 1,450. Then I'm going to say, okay, good. And in terms of the length of the agreement, what would work best for you? 3 or 5 years, or 5 years? They're going to say, well, longer the better. 5 years is good. And this is the key. This is called a pre-agreement. Now, if you do not do this, I promise you, they're going to go and tell their partner, they're going to change their mind, they're going to want to think about it, sleep on it, and you're going to get the deal falling out of bed later. So what you need to say is, listen, if I was to offer you the 1,450, all right, for the full 5 years, get that over today, in principle, how soon could we start? in principle, would you want to move forward? And what's going to happen is one of two things. They're either going to say, yes, no problem, or they're going to show a little bit of doubt. And any doubt, we then can start pulling out their objections, okay? In that space. We'll pull out their objections, all right? Now, the objections, once again, really important to get those there and then at the property viewing, because it's way easier to handle objections in person there and then than if they go home and find, these objections, these questions, these concerns, and then just tell you no via an email or a text, because that's what happens. All right. If you do not find the objection on the viewing, they'll just message you, hey, thanks so much. Think we're going to go for a normal family this time. Hey, Simon, we just, we'll do some due diligence, and then they'll never come back to you. So discovery, pitch, close, objections. And if you do all of that right, what's going to happen, okay, is these bits here. Within each one of these, you're going to be building momentum. Now, I like to call this, there's a gut I've got. And when I'm speaking to a prospect in sales or whatever it is, I always know I'm going to close them. All right. I already know I'm going to close them and get the deal around here. Because around here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a tie down, and we're basically going to tie the prospect down, and I'm going to feel them getting excited and warm and fuzzy. And as I move through the process, I know I'm going to get the deal. So discovery, pitch, close, objections. And then ideally, we're looking to close that deal on the viewing, not selling, focusing on, of course, you in the first place, okay, the offer and the service that we offer. And then lastly, the business to go through this process nice and smoothly.